Allergies are a sign of internal weakness, and it's not just the allergies that we're expressing, right? It is further than that, because it means if we have digestive dysfunction, if we have H. pylori, that can lead to Hashimoto. It can lead to weight gain. It can lead to chronic fatigue. It can lead to low testosterone. It can lead to infertility. It's like so on and so forth. It just keeps going, going, and going, and going. All right, here, ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of the Doc Jacque Show. I think that this is the perfect time to go over this particular topic. As we have seen, I was looking earlier, I think it was April 27th or 23rd of this year. I think it was Boston College came out with a study and was like, yes, you're right. Allergies are getting worse and worse every single year. So what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to break down kind of the why on it. Yes, we have a little bit drier weather. For us out in Arizona, we're kind of in like this little mini drought right now, but we're seeing a record amount of pollen that has been coming through and basically crushing a lot of people who may not have had any type of allergies previously. Now, for my family and I, we're getting used to the 2 to 5 year break-in period. I think we're on year 3 with spring, so we have a little bit of sinus stuff. The kids still getting used to it as well. But through that recurring exposure, we start to get used to it a little bit more each and every year. But for those of you who have suffered for quite some time or are looking for healthy alternatives for your allergies or for antihistamines, things like that, we're going to go over all of that today. At the end of the day, if you're suffering with allergies, what that means is that there is an external burden on the body, and your internal environment cannot handle the external load of stressors, be that pollen or whatever type of environmental toxins you might have. Now, there are different topics and things that can cause allergies. Mold toxicity is a common one, causes allergies, asthma, breathing issues, etc. But we're not talking about that one in particular today. We're talking about just more people just in overall the general population. And not everybody lives in a moldy home, though it's a lot more than what people would think. So we're going to break this down. So what I did is, I've been working with patients for many, many, many years. And we'll have patients who will just say, allergies is just kind of a thing. Every year I'll have allergies. And so I'll pick up some patients in like May, June or so, and they'll already be through the allergy season for their designated climate, because I see people all around the world. And then come the next year, we'll still be working together, and I'll be like, I didn't have any allergies this year. What happened? Like, how did that happen? And so when you build your internal environment up to be stronger, then you can handle more from the external. Now, what I'm going to go into is some of the science behind it. I pulled in a bunch of literature, a bunch of research, or like, how do these allergies to begin with, or how do they begin with at all? And a lot of it honestly comes down to the mom. No pressure, no extra pressure there, ma, but making sure that you have a nice, healthy immune system. And that's going to come down to the gut. Now, I think let me pull up my notes here real quick. I want to make sure I get the actual percentage, because I was blown away by this. And what I found was there's an extreme amount of moms who were given antibiotics while pregnant. So in the US, what this study shows is an estimated that more than half of the pregnant women in the US are taking antibiotics during pregnancy. So more than half of them. And what that does, and what is shown, is that antibiotics during pregnancy is shown to alter the microbiome, both internally as well as the birth canal. So moms, you give our kids their immune system. You give the kids your gut health. So if we're kind of bleaching out, if you will, the vaginal canal, and even if you do have a natural birth and you've been taking antibiotics, you're going to decrease the bacterial exposure for your child, which is then going to limit the amount of commensal microbiota, the commensal bacteria, the good bacteria, the probiotics that your child gets. Now, what we're seeing, though, is that the parents who are on antibiotics, a lot of times they're going to be having C-sections. And that goes into a whole nother area of things. So say we go through and we have a C-section. C-section, the routine, they cut the baby out. The baby does not go through the vaginal canal. And there, it usually typically goes into the doctor's hands. They test it, make sure the baby's okay, et cetera. And so there's less time for that skin-to-skin contact from mom to baby. And in fact, they typically keep the baby in more of a sterile environment. And it is crucial that that baby has that skin-to-skin contact and also has that crusty goo on them for as long as they can post-pregnancy or post-birth, so that they can have the best chance and the best immune system whenever it comes to their gut. Now, what's happening is we're not having that. That's not a normal process as much anymore. And a lot of women are going cesarean, whether for the ease of it, because it's nice to just have it scheduled and it doesn't interfere with holidays, doesn't interfere with birthdays, or, you might be due to give birth on your ex-boyfriend's birthday. And you're like, no, the heck with that. I'm going to do it the day before. So it's not. There's all kinds of reasons, and C-sections were originally done just purely for emergency. And now what they are doing is scaring people into thinking that it's emergency when it's actually not, because of the ease of doing it. And what that's doing is it's leading our kids to be more sick, earlier in life as well as later on in life, because we have to make sure that we nurture that baby's microbiome. Kids born cesarean are typically going to be sicker, which means they're also going to get rounds of their own antibiotics. And so this is where we start dealing with a leveling or a disruption, if you will, of the good bacteria in our guts. And what happens then is that we have a decrease in the good guys, which then lead to an increase of the bad guys. We'll go over these bacteria. They're known as opportunistic bacterial infections. Okay, so they're bacteria that need an environment conducive for their overgrowth. And there are categories where there are histamine producing bacteria, and there's a category of mast cell activating bacteria that are just within our gut. So we know when we take in pollen from the outside, we're having mast cell responses, we're having an increase in histamine response. That's why we take antihistamines or something of that nature to stop that inflammatory response. But what if it's also coming in from the inside? So you have same stuff happening inside, same stuff happening outside, and it's making this perfect concoction of in your gut. Right. And so this is what my patients were seeing as we're going through, and they may have never put that they had allergies on their intake form because it wasn't something that happened to them in the last month, 2 or 3. Right. And so then we get to the next year, like, oh my gosh, everything's good. What happened? Well, we eliminated the inflammatory bacteria, right? Because the inflammation is going to cause an increase in allergies. That's why people will drink alcohol and have an increase in allergy responses. I know my mom, I love her to death. And mom, if you're listening, I hope that you get this correlation. My mom, I think a record my dad said is 20 sneezes in a row. She's like, it's hilarious. I feel bad for her. I do, because I love her to death. But I feel bad for her. But it's usually every time she drinks her Chardonnay, she'll have one of these sneeze attacks. And it's just boom, 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 boom. We're like, oh my gosh. Like, I'll wait to say God bless you till you're done. But like, holy heck. And so that alcohol is going to dehydrate you. Dehydration with the alcohol is going to create an allergic response, okay, increase in inflammation, which is then going to make you more susceptible to sneezing, to allergies, and other things from the outside that's going to disrupt your normal internal harmony, right? So there are other medications too that can contribute to this, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. Make sure you're staying hydrated. Make sure you're staying away from alcohol, especially during like the pollen seasons. Otherwise, you're going to be suffering with more pollen, right? So you drink, you wake up, you're like, oh my gosh, my eyes are all crusty and they're so dry. Well, did you drink recently? And if so, there you go. All right. The other thing too is if you're smoking anything, either cannabis, vaping, cigarettes, cigars, the irritation to the respiratory tract lining and the nasal passages, that's going to cause inflammation. That's going to cause its own inflammatory response. It's going to cause its own type of histamine mast cell activation response, right? And so it's going to intensify your rate or risk of allergies. So just some easy lifestyle things you can do. It costs you $0.00 or $3.03 if you want, if you want to go that way. And it will help you to be successful both this season as well as preparing for the fall and into the new year. Okay. So moving on from that. So again, when kids get carpet bombed, whether it's from ear infections or they think they have strep throat, which is going to come from one of these opportunistic bacterial infections, you're typically going to receive some antibiotics, which is going to go after, try to eliminate that. It's going to alter the gut flora, increase leaky gut, which is then going to cause an increased expression of allergies, which you'll see. So right from birth, if we don't have babies born the proper way, and heaven forbid, you have to have it. I'm not shaming you if you had to have this particular procedure done. If you had to have a C-section, you were going to die, or baby was in dire danger, whatever it might be, then God bless you. And my condolences to you. I really hope that you're able to rebuild and regrow, but know that you and your child are going to really need some gut rebuilding, so some repopulation, some repairing, to make sure that if you do get pregnant again, or if that child does get sick, that it has a strong enough and you have a strong enough immune system to be able to fight it off naturally or use natural antimicrobials to help. A very interesting video was shared with me this week where this kid in high school was just doing a science experiment. He wanted to use oil of oregano and clove bud oil against amoxicillin and did some petri dish studies. Easy for me to say. And what he found was that just by using the oil of oregano, it completely eradicated the bad bacteria. And amoxicillin was like, meh. So then they had to use less and less and less. They ended up using a micro pipette for a drop, just a tiny itty bitty drop of oregano, and it still did better and outperformed amoxicillin, right? So oil of oregano, it's very strong, but also know that it can also have an impact on your good bacteria. So you don't want to use this all day, every day as just a preventative thing, but know that if you're suffering with these things, do some drops of oil of oregano. It is spicier than all get out. You can mix it in some water if you want to. It will dilute it a little bit. I usually recommend drop it on the tongue, drink some water, and wash it the rest of the way down. It'll also help you if you have like the gargles in the back of the throat where you're like, and you're constantly clearing the throat. Oil of oregano will do a great job of burning that through. Apple cider vinegar can help you with that as well. And that can help you to be successful to get that phlegm out of the body, out of the lungs, because you feel better quicker while eliminating the bad bacteria. Okay. So again, starts from birth, but if we're past that and we're like, hey, now we've got kids, they've had antibiotics, now they're in their teenage years, or hey, I'm 30 some years old, 50, 60 years old. What can I do? This is where we go into the how-tos here. Okay. Now, the how-tos that are going to be important, right? Now, it's important for kids, or can be important for kids, but it's also important for adults to increase their exposure to certain types of environments. Okay, so from what they found, it's very beneficial for children to be around animals, especially dogs at a young age, but adults can improve from this as well. And what that's going to do is it's going to increase the diversity. Okay, it's going to increase the diversity and microbiotic composition of your guts through exposure to pets, and actually cause a decrease or lower risk for allergic diseases. Okay, so it's pretty neat to see that can happen. Again, adults try to avoid antibiotics at all costs, right? I know that, they guilt us into, if you go to the doctor's office, this is why we don't go to the doctor, because we know if we go to the doctor, what the hell are they going to give you? They're going to give you an antibiotic. Even if it's a viral infection, going to give you an antibiotic because it's just easy. Get out the door. You have something and placebo kicks in. You're like, all right, if I take this, it's going to kill it because they said so. It's not necessarily true. And if it does, it's still going to leave you worse off than when you started, because it's going to bomb the good guys, which is what allowed for the opportunistics to be able to overgrow. Might have to have my team slow this down to like half speed, because I'm just like all about this today. So what we're going to see is if you do have consistent antibiotic use, what's going to happen is you're going to have an inhibited growth of bifidobacterium, Bacteroides, Collinsella, Lactobacillus, and Anorstripes. So the main cultures that you've probably heard of is Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium, or Bifido. Okay, so it's going to lower that down. So it's really important to make sure children, kids, etc., are breastfed as well. You're going to be passing these things along, your immune system moms, to the children. These are not things that you're going to be able to find in formula. Even if they try to fortify the formula with some sort of probiotic, it's not nearly going to be as strong as what you're going to get through breast milk. Plus, there's a link to the saliva of the baby that mom is then able to give antibodies that's specific for the germs and viruses and bacteria that the child is fighting. So there is that innate connection where you don't just want to bottle feed all the time. You want the baby to be able to latch to the breast. There's a lot of profound positives in that. So try your best to do that. New moms or moms-to-be, make sure that you make time for that. Plenty of time for it. The first 6 months is the most crucial time for the breastfeeding to make sure kids are getting all the immune system that they need. If you cut short or add in inflammatory milk or soy or some of these other bad formula blends, then you're going to leave your kid off to be sicker later on in life. Again, not trying to shame people. I know that different moms have different stressors with breast milk. There's so much pressure on moms, making sure they're feeding enough, they're not sleeping at night, dads don't want to help out. We really need to come together as a group and as a tribe to support moms better and give them the time that they need. Take that full maternity leave that you're able to take and make sure that you're trying to be present with your child as much as you can. It's so crucial, especially in the first 6 months or so. So that aside, let's move on here. So when it comes to these bacteria, I brought up these opportunistic bacteria. Okay. So anytime you run a stool test with me, or if you jumped onto my store site, my test shop site, what you're going to find is the GI map. It's one of my my biggest test that I run, my most common one that I run. It's very easy. It's very simple to read. A lot of stuff on there, tests for pretty much everything under the sun. And on page 3 of that test, you'll have a giant list of opportunistic infections. And what these are bacteria that are found within normal amounts within the body that when given the opportunity to overgrow, hence opportunistic, when you give them the opportunity to overgrow, they do so. And in immunocompromised people, these bacteria can trigger very inflammatory diseases, be that autoimmunity or something as simple as an increase in histamine output, or it can contribute to SIBO, so increase in either a methane output. If you're doing like a breath test, methane or sulfur, you're going to have that increase in gas formation due to poor digestive function because of these opportunistic infections. One of which is going to be the strep infection, which we're seeing a record amount of kids having strep throat. Adults even are having strep throat now. It's one of those things that randomly popped up again. I have my own suspicions on it, but at the end of the day, things for strep throat, you can take a lot of different things to try to work and treat that. Silver is a phenomenal way to do that. The oregano, again, you could do a biocidin liquid spray. You could do so many things to try to work and treat that. Echinacea, there's stuff that they stopped making called fire cider, but you can make it yourself with some horseradish, some spicy cayenne and things that kind of burns it, garlic. There's a lot of things that you can play into that. But again, you want to make sure that you're killing it in a way that you're not going to be weaker afterwards. Okay, and this is where these stool tests really come into play. So the big push here mentally is I really want you to figure out, do you have the ability, do you have the finances, do you have the know-how to do one of these tests? Because it's going to paint the picture for you, not just now, but in the future. Okay, and even if I don't read it, you can look some of this stuff up on your own and you'll see what I'm talking about here. Okay, now in these opportunistic infections, okay, there are 2 main categories that I'm talking about here. So the first one is going to be histamine producing bacteria. The second one is going to be the mast cell activating bacteria. And so there's a big list here. So I'll go really slowly here so that if you do run these tests, you'll know exactly which ones I'm talking about. So when it comes to the histamine producing bacteria, that's going to start actually with lactobacillus. Now, if lactobacillus goes too high, right, it's outside of the normal range, then what can happen is you can have an increase in histamine response, okay? Another one is known as Morganella. You can have Pseudomonas. There's 2 strains. There's the SPP and the aeruginosa. It's just SPP. You'll see it on the test. There's Citrobacter frundi, okay? Klebsiella pneumonia. You can have Proteus mirabilis, Enterobacter, Escherichia, Fusobacterium. Okay, and so what this is going to indicate here is if you're running one of these SIBO tests, and I actually have one of these things, it's called a food marble over here because I was reading a book and I got suckered into buying one of these things because I was curious about it. If you're watching this on video, it's like this little breath thing. And there's a specific way to do it. You breathe in, breathe out, and it'll basically tell you post-meal if you have some sort of SIBO or CFO type presentation. It's like $200 or $300 for that unit. You can use as much as you want. It links up with an app on your phone. Just make sure you clean it because you don't want bad bacteria growing in that thing. But if it's going to increase your histamine in the body, what's going to happen is we're going to have a higher expression of allergies, both internally as well as externally. So again, if we're combining a lot of histamine inside of our guts, we're going to be more inflamed, we're going to be more bloated. That inflammation, that bloat is going to also typically make us want to crave sweet foods or carby foods, which is going to be sugar, which is then going to cause more growth from these particular bacteria. And it just makes this nasty, nasty, nasty gut health. Okay. You'll hear people who are like, I never had allergies. And then I went in for a staph infection, got crushed with an antibiotic, came out. And ever since then, I've had allergies. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with that. Right. So that's going to be that response here. And we want to make sure we also have a nice, strong immune system. Okay, if we have a low secretory IgA or even an extensively high secretory IgA that's off the charts, our immune system is not going to be able to properly regulate the histamine response or the mast cell response in response to external stimuli. Okay, so get these particular infections taken out. If you're like, well, doc, what do I do if I have these? Is there something that you would do or something you would take? And I would say yes. If you want just a cookie cutter, SIBO, CFO type approach, I could put a link in here, or I could just tell you right now, go into my shop and you would want GI Microbe X. You'd be doing 2 pills 3 times a day for that. Oil of oregano, 2 pills 3 times a day. Sometimes people's tolerance is maybe only about 1 3 times a day, but 2 is going to be good to get the proper dose of things in there. And then I usually like to do berberine synergy. All 3 of these are from Designs for Health. Berberine synergy is going to be 2 pills 3 times a day as well. Berberine is a great antimicrobial, but it also helps with building and rebuilding diversity of your microbiome. Okay, so if you combine these 3 together, you're typically going to have a very nice approach to eliminating some of these dysbiotic bacteria. Okay, and I usually tell people to run this course for about 2 months. Now, through this, you want to make sure that you're not eating an inflammatory diet. You want to cut down on the excessive carbs, processed sugar, and all the bad stuff out there. And again, if you want more of like a specified protocol or more of like a diet to it, I have plenty of them available. It's what I use for my templates with my patients. But in order to just get the ball rolling for you, this is going to be huge. Okay. The other sign that you may have this overgrowth, even without testing, okay, is yes, you could test with this little food marble thing, but say somebody told you that prebiotic fiber is great for you. Okay, and you take this prebiotic fiber and you bloat and it hurts, and it's more than just a couple of days because sometimes that fermentation process at first can be a little bloaty and it goes away. But if it's continuing for a week or 2 weeks, you're like, man, this hurts. My gut feels like it's completely off. That's a sign that you have bacterial or fungal overgrowth within the body. Okay, because what's happening is that prebiotic fiber is also being used to feed the bad bacteria that's already stronger than the good bacteria. And if you're like, well, doc, is it SIBO or SIFO or what am I dealing with? Stick your tongue out. If your tongue is white, yellow, or orange, have some streaks on it like that on the full length of the tongue, even if it's just a small bit, that means you have some candida overgrowth, so that's going to push into the SIFO. Typically, you're going to have them both together because they both love the same environments. Okay, this is short of running our stool test. Okay, this is easy things you could do. Look in the mirror and see it. I also recommend that if you're doing this elimination portion, right, make sure you're using a tongue scraper to scrape off any additional bacteria or fungal bodies, candida that's on the tongue, to make sure that you're not swallowing more down with every breath, drink, or food that you eat. Okay, when you're doing it, big warning, please make sure that you're not trying to scrape. It's like tongue. I'm trying to think of an easier term than scraping, just gently doing it. Just ever so gently. You don't need to literally scrape taste buds off, otherwise your tongue will swell. You won't be able to taste anything anymore, and you'll be like, it didn't work. Gently do it. Okay, or look up a YouTube video on how to tongue scrape successfully. I'm sure there's some out there. Okay. Moving past the histamine producing bacteria, this is something that I really want to put in here because this is a category that not many people talk about, but this is the mast cell activating bacteria. And there's candida in here too. So candida can cause, again, that increase in SIBO, SIFO type symptomatology, in particular SIFO, make you crave carbs, which makes you feed that process and feed the inflammation, feed the histamine response, feed the mast cell response, and then you can have a whole host of other symptoms associated with that. We already talked about the staph and strep pieces here, the Pseudomonas, the Enterococcus, and then we're going up to a bacteria that not many people know about. Or if you've listened to me on these podcasts, you do know about it. And if you're working with me, you probably test positive for it. But it's going to be Helicobacter pylori or H pylori. Okay? Now, H pylori is one of those ones that is a bacteria that flies under the radar in 99% of testing that's out there. If you went to a doctor, did a breath test or some other sort of test, it's not a GI map for H pylori, I can almost guarantee you it's not going to show up positive on any other test. And it's not saying that this one makes it up because you didn't have it and it gives it to you, but it is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly common. Okay, now the other thing that's important to note is when you're taking these antihistamines, okay, typically what's going to happen is you're going to have these antihistamines, you're going to have acid reflux too, and you're going to be taking Tums. So you're doing a lot of things to suppress the stomach acid within your gut. When you're doing that, H pylori, if you have it, is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. Okay, now H pylori is going to lead to SIBO. It's going to lead to SIFO. It's going to lead to parasitic infections. It's going to lead to poor nutrient malabsorption or poor nutrient absorption or malabsorption. Okay, everything. I think of H pylori like the guard of the castle or like the drawbridge. Okay, because in your stomach, everything you eat has to go past an H pylori infection if it's there. Okay. Now, if H pylori is present in your gut, it's like having the drawbridge completely open. Okay, anything is able to come through. You don't even need a Trojan horse to get through. Just like, come on in, screw up my gut. Come on, more the merrier. Let's do this. Let's do this. And all these docs are like, well, just take betaine or just work on stomach acid or just kill candida or just kill this bacteria. And I'm like, well, but wait, what if you have something that's continuously letting these things in? Right? I just did a podcast on parasites. You have H. pylori, it's going to be super easy for you to get parasites because H. pylori is kind of parasitic in nature too, even though it's a bacteria. Just like, come on in, let's do this, let's party, guys. Right? So if we don't first kill H. pylori or don't first find that cause, then the drawbridge remains open. We may feel good for a period of time. Then after 2 months or so, then you have more of an overgrowth. Like, crap, I have to do this like every couple of months. It's getting really expensive. When all the while, you could have put that money towards testing yourself on a stool test and figure out, hey, what do I actually have in here before I do anything at all? Do I even need to do this? And if so, where do I start? Right? Because you can just have these symptoms. You could just have allergies due to an H. pylori infection. And it could be an acute one. You could have just picked it up, which has not given you a chance yet to be able to develop opportunistic infections or candida or parasites. And all you have to do is zap H. pylori, get rid of it. Now, given it's very tricky to get rid of, but you get rid of that stuff, your immune system is going to be stronger, your drawbridge is going to go up, and anything that tries to come in is going to have to go up against that wall, and it's not going to be very successful. Okay, because then your stomach acid is going to come up, stomach acid pH of 2 or so. Stuff is strong enough to strip paint off a car. Right? So if you've got the drawbridge up and you've got just freaking acid sitting in there, nothing's going to be able to get past that to kill you or get after you or cause this activation to occur. Okay? So making sure that we take note of these things. And again, if you're like, well, how do I find these? A stool test, a GI map is going to be a golden way to do that. Now, candida can be tricky. The easiest way to look for candida is going to be at the tongue. Look at the tongue, see if it's white. It's going to be a very definitive diagnosis. Do I have candida or do I not? You can't really have a white tongue and not have it unless you're drinking milk or some other white substance. Sometimes coffee will do it for you too. So look first thing in the morning. There's other things you can do. There's like the saliva spit test where you spit saliva out in a cup in the morning. And they'll say, this is kind of one of those wives' tales, maybe. But they'll say that if it has legs that kind of grow off of the spit, then there's candida that's going to be present. Are you craving sweets consistently? It's usually going to be candida. Women, are you having irregular menstrual cycles? Or do men and women, do you have rashes? Do you have yellowing of the nails or fungal issues on the nails or white spots on the nails? That's going to be due to candida or fungal overgrowth. So there are a lot of ways that when you gather all this information, it puts you back in charge of your health. Okay, it gets you back on track because these things, these antihistamines, these Tums, these things are going to cause really harmful damage to your body. And I don't want you to consistently have to medicate yourself or go every 2 weeks or so or every week for allergy shots to desensitize yourself to these things, right? Because your body's trying to protect you. If we're trying to override the body's innate intelligence, the body's going to fight back in one way or another. And that fight back is going to be seen through side effects or negative side effects. Tums has their own. These antihistamines are going to have their own as well. Okay, so making sure that you do everything you can to get through it. And trust me, I know. I just got pounded here. Where was it 2 nights ago or something? I couldn't breathe out my freaking nose. It was insane. The winds here picked up at like, I think 50 miles an hour. So I was just whipping pollen everywhere. Put on a rack on my car. So I'm like breathing in pollen. Again, I've only been here a couple of years. So my body's still trying to accumulate some antibodies and resistance to it. And it took me out. And I finished my shift. I got real tired. Passed out that night, woke back up, had the day off from the gym, met with some patients and was doing fine. Woke up this morning, boom, beautiful, good to go. Okay, so your body can develop these things as it's trying to get better and better and better. Now, for those of you who are suffering and you're like, well, what the heck do I take? And I don't know what to do. So trying to stay away from like Claritins and the Allegras, those are going to be some of the things that I would absolutely recommend to do. The Flonases aren't exactly going to help. There's a lot of natural alternatives you can find in like Whole Foods or even Sprouts or even just some just normal stores, or just pop it on Amazon and finding like nasal sprays or getting like a silver nasal spray from us. Results RNA makes a great seasonal allergy quercetin blend. And then the other thing I was going to say is Designs for Health makes a great blend. It's quercetin and nettles. And you do, I think that one's 3 pills, and it usually knocks the mucus response down like within minutes. It's really fast. Or you can use Histaese, which is going to have some of that in there with some bicarbonate salts in there as well to try to bring down the overall histamine release. Now, remembering this is designed to help us through a tough time, but if we really truly want to get to the root cause of this, make sure our good bacteria are built up. Make sure our bad guys are at a normal level. Make sure we don't have candida. Make sure we don't have H pylori. Make sure that we don't drink alcohol or processed sugar and all these extra carby things that are going to be designed to bring us down further and further and further. So now this stuff goes for adults as well as children. Okay, so if your children are suffering tremendously with allergies, there's a little product you could take. It's called C+ Biophys. Some vitamin C in there, some quercetins in there as well. It's also super tasty. Kids don't mind taking it. If your kids are able to swallow pills, I'd go with quercetin and nettles or the Histaese. But either one is going to be very profound at helping your kid get through this tough time. Make sure they're blowing their nose. You could use nasal rinses too so they don't get these sinus infections. And if they do, their body will kick it out naturally as well. You can give them some silver support or reach out like, hey, I did that. My kids still develop, blah, blah, blah. What can I do? Happy to help you figure that out. But at the end of the day, we want to get to that root cause of the problem. So test is like the biggest thing I can tell you to do. If it's the only test you do as like a yearly physical for your family, I would save up every year and run a GI map once a year. Okay. And that's really at minimum, because if you have certain infections, you want to see how you're doing, do it every, twice a year, every 6 months or so. You run a test to make sure that you're staying ahead of the game. It's kind of what my family and I do. We're obsessed with it. And yes, it's easy for me to get because I just order it. It shows up at my house and I'm like, hey, Cynthia, send me a couple of these, and boom, we do it, and boom, we get the results. But you want to make sure that you're setting your kid up for success, because allergies are a sign of internal weakness. And it's not just the allergies that we're expressing, right? It is further than that, because it means if we have digestive dysfunction, if we have H pylori, that can lead to Hashimoto. It can lead to weight gain. It can lead to chronic fatigue. It can lead to low testosterone. It can lead to infertility. It can lead to leaky gut, which will lead to infertility. It will lead to miscarriages. It will lead to parasite infections. And it's like so on and so forth. It just keeps going and going and going and going. And so much of the standard American lifestyle and standard American diet are going to be directly correlated and causing these types of things to happen. So we have to mentally know these triggers and fix them, reverse them, and make sure that we don't become just another number who suffers with allergies. And I would love for next allergy season, when it comes by, you send me a message like, Jacque, I did this. My allergy is fantastic. Or I only had like one down day. I'm down for 3 weeks. I could work better. I can hang out with my kids. I'm able to play on a football field. I used to have allergies so bad. We'd have spring ball for football and even for baseball. And I'd be in the outfield, or I'd just be practicing on some grass, because we were old school back then. We only had grass. We didn't have turf. We weren't that fancy. We rented our field, which is kind of embarrassing, Davis Field. But either way, it'd be so hard. And I'd be trying to run on the field, and that inflammatory response would decrease my oxygen output. So then I'd be more lightheaded. I would have more lactic acid build up, and then I wouldn't be able to run as hard. I wouldn't be as good. I couldn't see. I'd be rubbing my eyes. I'd be sneezing on the field, getting snot everywhere. I mean, I grew up with like some of the worst allergies possible. And a lot of it was unfortunately due to my diet and the things that I was eating. I had a very heavy dairy-based diet, which is one of the things, if anybody's suffering with allergies, get the hell off dairy as soon as possible. And people will yell at me, and if this clip happens to be posted on Instagram, I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate again for it, but get the hell away from dairy on this. If you continue to eat dairy, you're going to increase that allergic response, and it's typically going to increase mucus in the body. And if you don't believe me, just go to a Starbucks, order a latte, or have somebody order a latte, and sit by them, and within about 5 minutes or so, listen for this. Everyone starts clearing their damn throats. Why? Milk causes inflammation, increases mucus production. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you want studies on it. Do it, watch it, and you'll see. Okay? Either way, the point of this is to be able to rebuild and repair your bodies. I told you some of the things, some of the supplements that I recommend for my patients to take to work on SIBO and SIFO, as well as if you do have allergies, you can take the Histaese, quercetin and nettles, or for kiddos, you can give them the C+ Biophys. It's always good to have vitamin D in there as well. There's like D3 drops you can use for the kids. You can use it for the adults too, or you can use the D-Avail 10K to get 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, which will help with the strong immune response. There's a lot of things that we can do, but the point is to be healthy now. Don't just ignore allergies as just a pain in the ass. Know that that's a sign of inner weakness. And if you're anything like me, I don't put up with any inner weakness. I can't stand it. I want to make sure that I am as strong as humanly possible, not just for myself, but for my family, for my wife, for my kids, for my patients. If I go down, I can't take care of my patients. If I go down, I can't take care of my kids. If I go down, I can't take care of my wife. I can't provide. I can't be everything that I want to be. And that's just not acceptable for me. So if you have questions on it, again, you are like, hey, you know what, maybe I might get that stool test, just go into my shop there, my lab shop, go just grab one. It'll direct ship to you. All you gotta do is do a poop sample, boom, send it out. Super easy. You don't have to go anywhere at all, and you'll have that all taken care of for you. And then the results get sent to you when they come in. And you can have me read them. There's a charge for that. But if you just want to read them yourself or just go through it and just listen to this podcast as you're reading your own test, go for it. It's totally fine. I want to get this information out there because I feel really bad for people who are suffering with allergies all the time. I know it sucks. It's not enjoyable. And it sucks when you see your kids sneezing, coughing, and can't sleep at night, So hopefully as usual, this information is useful to you guys. I love you all for tuning in here, and share this with your friends too. If you know people who are suffering with allergies, you're like, they can't find any answers, or, heaven forbid, we got these kids that are out there, like they're allergic to 57 different things. You're like, I don't know what to do. Look at the gut, right? Look at the gut. And once the gut is fixed, usually everything else goes back into normal balance and normal alignment. So for those of you out here, please share this. I love you all, and we'll talk next time.